On this episode of Skeptiko.
But the thing is, and this is really highlighting in my film, science is based on assumptions. Some of them were wrong. Let's replace some of those archaic assumptions with some new ones. It just you can just let's just assume consciousness is fundamental. Wow. What kind of how can we frame and rebracket all the questions we're asking?
Let's assume the universe has meaning, or let's at least assume that it's not meaningless.
Right.
I mean, what a crazy metaphysical assumption. And these guys spew it out like it's, fact. How have we proven by observation or experimentation that the universe is meaningless? We haven't, as far as I know.
Stay with us for Skeptiko.
Welcome to Skeptiko, where we explore controversial science with leading researchers, thinkers, and their critics. On this episode of Skeptiko, a promo interview gone wrong, or maybe gone right. Let me explain. I originally contacted Frank Huguenard about his really quite amazing series of films, Beyond Me, Beyond Reason, and his new films on extended consciousness and healing. And I expected to do just kind of a short promo that I would insert into a Skeptiko episode. But as it was going on, and certainly in the editing of it, I realized that there was a lot of information here that I thought was worth sharing, and it was exciting and an interesting dialogue, and I just couldn't cut it out and not give it to you. So it's a little bit unstructured. There's about 12 minutes at the beginning that I assumed I would cut out, so it's kind of just jumping into topics without much introduction. So in this interview, we talk about not only his films and about extended consciousness, but we also talk about materialism and the state of science as we know it, and how science really is stuck in the dogmatism that we talk about so much on this show, and how Frank has discovered this connection between materialism and materialism. We also talk a little bit about the implications of some of this for medicine in particular, and some very interesting advances in genetics that Frank has discovered along the way. As I said, it's kind of a free-ranging discussion. It gets a little bit loose at times, but since I don't usually publish these kind of interviews and these kind of just loose dialogues, I thought it might be a nice change of pace. So here it is. I hope you enjoy my conversation with filmmaker Frank Huguenard. What I thought we'd do is, do really kind of a 5 to 10 minute promo. I don't know that we want to do I don't think I want to do a full interview on this, because I just want to kind of slide it in with something else. I want to let people know that it's out there, point them to it. You do an excellent job. But I think that's probably a good fit for what I'm trying to do on Skeptiko. Does that sound okay?
Sure, that's fine. Is there any context to this as far as the rest of the show on this particular airing date?
No, not that I have planned. I'll try and get it in with something good. But other than that, I mean, my basic approach is that, here's a guy who's tackling some really tough issues of consciousness, science, and spirituality. And I think that's what's really unique about what you do is, I mean, you get down and dirty with everything that people might, really ask.
Dude, wait until you see my new project.
The Beyond Me or?
No. Beyond. I'm calling it Beyond Space and Time, but right now I have, if I took away just the cream of the crop, my best interviews, the best sound bites, I've got a 10-hour film. I mean, I'm getting down, I'm interviewing cellular biologists and scientific historians. I've developed 3 different theories in the last 6 months that are each one of them is mind-blowing. My favorite is that when we move, we're actually moving backwards in time. Taking a look at retrocausation in conjunction with, I don't know if you know of Jim Carpenter and his work with First Sight.
I've heard of it. I don't remember it off the top of my head. It's funny, the first person that I talked to who really kind of said that in a really kind of matter-of-fact way is, have you ever heard of Dr. Julia Asante? She is a medium who kind of got her PhD in an unrelated field, but has an Ivy League PhD. But she's a medium. And her thing is that she's one of the few mediums I've talked to that said, on one hand, she said like a really basic thing that you cover nicely is that throw out the idea of time, and just throw it out. I mean, as soon as you accept modern quantum physics, I mean, we're way past any conception of time. So she goes, we can let go of this idea of your previous life. It ain't like that, And she kind of talks about simultaneous life, that you're leading these lives simultaneously, which then really completely opens the door to retro causation. There's no two ways about it,
Sure. Multiple dimensions. You can be on different realms simultaneously. I mean, there's no limits to any of this stuff. Once you get your mind around the fact that your mind is limited, you can't really get your mind around it, actually.
But and maybe we can talk about this in the little bit of time that we have, is that I really think that's awesome. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how you treat that in the movie, because in a way it kind of goes against part of what you say that I think really resonates, which is that's beyond reason. You know what I mean? We can't really get there. And to pretend like we really can get to some kind of satisfying answer, in a way, might miss the point as well, because the point... So go ahead.
Well, but reason's intellect. And the intellect can only operate at the five senses level. That's not to say that there isn't some other way of knowing that's outside of the intellect. So you can get to satisfactory answers, but you have to be able to get your mind out of the way so you can experience directly as the observer of everything.
Yeah, I mean, my problem there is, as we both know, people claim to get there and then come back with all sorts of contradictory kind of information, which I'm okay with, but when we try and pack that back into something like the truth, I think it kind of defeats the purpose of, because the edge that I guess I'm at, and I think it's okay to just kind of let this fly and then we'll see how it goes in the interview, is that,
sure,
and I hate to say for most people, because that makes it sound like I'm somehow different. I'm just another most people. But I think it's that edge of just, let me fully come to terms with that I am really a spiritual being. I'm not a material being. Let me fully come to terms with I'm not just here now. I'm eternal. And, put off all the intellectualization about everything else until I fully, embrace that and start being a better person in this body. You know what I mean?
So this next thing I'm working on was going to be a film, but now it's probably going to be 5 films, and I'm aggressively planning on releasing all 5 by June 1st. The whole second film is going to be a discourse on providing both at the cellular level and as well as at our whole organism level a biophysiological basis for being a spiritual being. In other words, you're a spiritual being, right? And our spirit is in this Julia Sand and everyone else will tell you, we have these subtle energy fields. That's are part of our spiritual body. But the subtle body is part of the material world, okay? This means, and this just has to be a fact, this means there has to be an interface between the dense and the more subtle layers. It can't just happen by magic. Your cell phone, if you don't get a signal, you're not going to be able to make a call. There's got to be a transceiver on the cell phone that's an input-output device that takes the more subtle energies, transcodes them into something that the cell phone can translate into a voice. So your body, and this will be covered in the film, I'll be outlining what part of your body's physiology is an interface to being a spiritual creature.
Yeah, great, until that is transcended, right? Because we have all sorts of cases where that's transcended, right? Some great spiritual being says, I don't have to worry about any of that. Boom, you're enlightened. Or says, boom, I'm now over here or over there, if you believe those accounts. So it's like...
I'm over here and over there.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's the problem I have with that is like when we kind of dumb it down, not really dumb it down, but when we pack it into this scientific explanation in order to kind of dress it up and make it sound like, hey, we're legit here, guys. You know, this matches up with this stuff. I think we run the risk of losing the whole thing. It's just like, I mean, as a slight digression, but I always look at parapsychology, which, you know, tried so hard to say, come on, let us in the club, guys. Let us in the club. Then they got in the club and they found out they were completely co-opted by the people who said, oh, yeah, you're in the club. You know what we're going to put you in? You're anomalistic psychology. You're why people believe weird things. Why do we want to play that game? Why not just sit back and say, you know what? You have a nice game. It's done some nice things, but it's just you're looking through the wrong end of the frickin' telescope. It's not about that. Consciousness is somehow fundamental. So all the laws that you're looking at, all the cellular biology stuff you're looking at is all okay, but it's all got a huge asterisk at the end of it that says only if consciousness allows it. So it's some little game that you're playing over there where you can measure things.
Not that you asked the question, but that's a great question. What I'm producing, there's never been anything like this before. That really, people are going to say, yeah, duh. It's like I've always known this, but I didn't know that I knew it. I mean, we have in our body a semiconductive liquid crystal fiber optic network that moves data through it at superluminal speeds. You know, it's like we are spiritual creatures. I mean, consciousness is fundamental. And meantime, we get sick. And the basis for my new series is all about healing. We get sick. We have illnesses socially, mentally, emotionally, physically. People have abilities to heal us. Huh, that's interesting. How does that happen? How is it that somebody who's got end-stage metastatic cancer can have a spontaneous remission because somebody waves their arms around? You know, I don't believe in miracles, or like Einstein said, either everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle. So what the hell is happening, seriously, at the biophysiological, at the cellular level, when somebody does this, what's actually happening? It's not, I don't think it's consciousness. I don't think it's, you know.
Well, but isn't it, if consciousness is fundamental, it's all consciousness. But I get where you're coming from. But yeah, but you get where I'm coming from too.
Absolutely.
That, you know, why do people choose to, if we accept that part of the literature, why do people choose to take a life, be in a body that is a baby that dies at 6 months old with some incurable? Why do they do that? And they come back and they tell us, and I don't accept this on totally face value, but I throw it into the mix, you know. Hey, that was my life purpose. That's what I was supposed to do. That's how I was supposed to interact with these other people. So in that sense, you know, I mean, I'm all for energy healing and all the rest of that, but I'm also for what is my life purpose? If I'm supposed to die of cancer, you know, tomorrow, is that part of my plan? You know, I mean, both can be true, but only in the sense of this much. It's beyond reason to, you know.
Yeah, it's fun for me. I mean, I've had the most amazing 8 months of my life. I've driven 20,000 miles. I'm going a week from tomorrow. I'm driving up to New England for the third time. I'm in North Carolina. I went out to California, Oregon. I mean, I'm meeting amazing people, and it's just been incredible. You know, having conversations like I am with you now, and just, you know, I'm going to put something out there that's going to be mind blowing, and what people take with it, you know, the people are going to take with it. At the end of the day, all I want is to have, you know, global peace. That's not too hard. We ought to be able to do that. I don't see why not.
Right. Okay, I'm going to turn off my video, and we'll do a couple minutes and see how it turns out.
Sure. You know,
go ahead.
I just love the fact that you're, you know, I've done a bunch of these, and people say, well, send me a list of questions. And, you know, this is a much better style of interview.
We'll see what you say at the end. No, it's all good. I mean, I have nothing but good things. I hope everybody watches it. I'm joined now by Frank Huguenard, who is the producer and, I guess, the feature presenter in a rather amazing series of films that you can find at at Beyond Me Films. Frank, thanks so much for joining us. And we were just chatting a little bit about this rather remarkable next series of films you're coming out with. So I guess you should start by telling people a little bit about the whole film series and what you're working on now, because I think it's going to be a perfect fit for what a lot of Skeptiko listeners are interested in terms of consciousness, science, spirituality, and all those tough questions surrounding it.
Yeah, hi, Alex. Thanks so much for having me on your show. Yeah, I've been, I have a history as a software engineer in Silicon Valley, and several years ago, I just I've been fascinated with this kind of stuff my entire life. I've had a lifelong history of precognitive dreams, of psychic experiences. So it's always been something that's been fascinating to me. And about 6 years ago or so, I decided to take my background in software engineering and start producing some documentary films on, like you said, on science and spirituality. And I put out 3, and they've been, much acclaimed. And I've gotten some really nice, testimonials along the way, and people compare them favorably to, all the other films in the genre, What the Bleep and I Am and all these films.
But let me just interject, because what people will find if they haven't run across your films like Beyond Reason, which is the first one that I watched, what they'll find is they have kind of, at least the first ones, have kind of a handmade quality. That's not to denigrate it. It's not like a really cheap YouTube video, but it really is like someone an avid interest in kind of tackling these really big questions about who am I, and what about this consciousness thing, and what is science telling me versus what are all these religious traditions telling me. So you mix in some great clips and interviews with some other folks, but at the beginning, this feels like a real passion project that you just had to get out on the web through YouTube. And I think that's part of the appeal. Is that what are people responding to it partly because of that?
Sure. This was definitely a passion. The first film I did, I actually thought I was done in 3 weeks. I had approached a few documentary makers in the Bay Area that I'd known, and they were like, well, this can't be done, which, is the last thing you want to tell me, because then I'll go and do it. And in the end, but from the moment I decided to do Beyond Me, which is the one I started with several years ago, to the time it was released, it was 8 weeks. And the fact that they're handcrafted, they're not big money, overproduced, polished works of, big studio productions, I think has a certain organic appeal to people.
Great. So why don't we tell folks about this new project you're working on? Because you were just teeing me up with some of it, and it really sounds exciting. You're kind of going to the next level. This maybe won't look quite as handmade. You've collected, I guess, just dozens and dozens of interviews in many, many hours with some really smart science folks. Tell us what's going on with this latest film.
So I thought I was done making films. I built an organic farm the last few years, and I've been doing other projects. And for some reason, last summer I just got this whim to go off and do something on healing. If you go to someone, you get a Reiki treatment, and you become healed. What's happening there? I really wanted to know at the cellular level, at the organism level, what is actually transpiring. And by the time I'm done interviewing in a few weeks, I will have interviewed over 40 people. I've driven over 20,000 miles, and I've got enough footage to make 5 films. And it's really mind-blowing, profound stuff that I've stumbled across, really looking at the nature of science. I'm reading a book right now, just released by James Strick on Wilhelm Reich, and it has a lot of the history of vitalism, materialism, how materialism became what it is today. It's not a coincidence that science is based on materialism, and the Western society is materialistic. They're one and the same thing, and it's
absolutely,
and it's a disease. It's been proven. I mean, Karl Popper is famous for his falsification, view on science. If a theory can't be falsified, it's not worth anything. And science is basically based on this theory that everything is chemical and physically reducible. That's materialism. And that theory's been proven false, and yet science doesn't. Science is so dogmatically bought into this idea that they can't. It's not a theory to them that can be disproven. They won't even look at any evidence or any proof or anything that's published that goes beyond this. And you and I both know that there's been countless studies on consciousness that disprove materialism.
Absolutely. And Frank, where will people find this new film when it's out? And I guess we should point them to beyondmefilm.com, because that's where they can find your previous films. They're very easy to access. You can rent them for a couple bucks, and all the money goes back into the films, right? I mean, it's a non-for-profit educational venture.
That's right. I mean, all my films so far have been self-funded. This project's been self-funded. If you see my work and you want to throw in a couple bucks to help fund a new one, there's a crowdfunding page. Or you can just go on Amazon and purchase a rental of the films for a week, and that all helps produce more films.
Great. And when will the new one be out? And what's the title of it? Will that be at beyondmefilm.com as well?
Yeah, those will all be. I'm hoping to have, well, let's put it this way. Something's going to be released by June 1st. I'm hoping to have as many as 5 films released on June 1st, which is my birthday. I'll have at least probably 3 of these films put together by then. I'm almost finished with one, and then I've got at least 2 or 3 more. The first one is just a basis for, the science of consciousness, and then the others are going to go much more into healing and how healing happens and the different modalities of healing.
Great. Well, it's exciting work, and I certainly commend you for doing it. I encourage everyone to check it out, beyondmefilm.com. Hold on, everybody. I thought the interview was over, but we actually had a conversation after the interview. Here's some additional back and forth that we had after the official interview was over. I interviewed Michael Shermer a couple weeks ago, and I wish I had read or listened to this debate that he did with Jeffrey Schwartz. It must have been 10 years ago. But after I published the interview with Shermer, I went back and listened to this. If you know Jeffrey Schwartz, UCLA, School of Psychiatry and Psychology, OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder, kind of claim to fame is he was the lead consultant for the Leonardo DiCaprio film that he did. Jeffrey Schwartz, brilliant guy, goes and does this extensive research and finds that mindfulness meditation helps his patients. He goes one step further, and he's one of the leaders in brain imaging technology, and he does this brain imaging work before, brain imaging work 6 weeks after the mindfulness meditation work. Hey, their brains are different. How can immaterial thoughts change a physical structure? We can't do that. That violates materialism. So these guys do this debate at Caltech or one of those places. And Shermer is just, Shermer would drive you nuts if you didn't just say, the reason I kind of like to talk to those guys and everyone else thinks, why are you talking to these atheists? Is because, hey man, that's fucking mainstream science. That's mainstream science. And I think the more that we say, and I don't know that I'm not accusing you of saying it, but I think everyone in our camp sometimes says, oh, that's not really the mainstream view. Science is moving this way. It's not. No, that is the mainstream. They're going to hold to that all for as long as they bloody well can for exactly the reason that you said. Our structures are built on materialism. Our economic structures, our social structures, all that's built on materialism. I'm making this really long, but the point is, in this interview, Schwartz says, I was talking to this reporter and I explained to her that science would have you believe that the thoughts you're having right now are not your own. You're not making any decisions. There's not really a free will. There's not. And he said, she looked at me dumbfounded and said, no, that can't possibly be true. And I think that's where I'm at, is just reminding people of, no, That's really this fight against this big battle against science and stuff like that. Science is so far to the extreme of what any reasonable person would believe. Like when you did that little thing on materialism, I think sometimes people get lost in that. I always come back and say, no, science's current position is you are a biological robot leading a meaningless life in a meaningless universe. So now you can either accept that or you can accept something different that I'm going to offer up. But realize that if you reject what I'm saying, then you're implicitly buying into this other thing that a 6-year-old wouldn't even accept. Yet that's the reality that we live in.
And everyone's pretty much ignorant to this.
Yes.
In other words, all of pharmaceutical or medical
exactly.
and ionizing radiation versus non-ionizing, they all assume, I think it's so dogmatic and it's such materialism. If you were sitting in a cave over in Afghanistan observing this structure in the context of what makes a religion, what makes a belief system, what's a theocracy, I think we should start a class action suit to stop and prevent the NSF and the National Institute of Health from funding these people on the grounds of division between church and state. They are so religious in their dogma. And I've talked to people on this trip, young, bright, 25-year-old biologists who just sat there, stared at me and said, no. It's reduction, these people are so believing the system. I don't know if they're indoctrinated with it or what, but this is science.
Yeah.
And it hasn't budged an inch. Max Planck and Niels Bohr and Schrodinger and these guys come and go. You got, all these biologists come and go. They haven't budged an inch.
Yeah, that's like, Dean Radin, I saw his presentation recently on, his thing, speaking of double slit. I mean, I think he's done some amazing things with that double slit experiment. But he presents just this kind of throwaway point, and I hope to interview him again about this, because he throws up this slide and he goes, on a recent survey of quantum physicists, we asked him to explain the double slit experiment, and he goes, 33% said this, and 25% said, yeah, maybe its consciousness is real, So then he goes on and says, so his point was, these ideas aren't so far out there, But my point was to come back and say, what's that first group of 36% that says, we should just ignore that because somehow it has to be wrong, the ultimate belief statement, the ultimate religious statement is like, it's the shut up and calculate thing. Oh no, just ignore it because you did something wrong. Well, go find out what they did wrong or something. But how can you just say, I just ignore that result, And it's been like that for 75 years. So there you go.
Yeah, well, that was Feynman, right? Don't let your children grow up to be theoretical physicists. He basically said, just focus on the application. Yeah,
exactly.
And one third of our economy now is based on quantum mechanics. It's the most successful theory ever. Do you know what CRISPRs are? Dude, look up CRISPR. It's an acronym without the E.
How do you spell it?
It's like CRISP, CRISPR. All right, check this out. This is mind blowing. So they discover some scientists in Japan looking at genomics. And there's some nice video presentation. I think MIT or Harvard has a nice video if you just do a YouTube video on CRISPR-Cas9. So they're looking at Ebola bacteria. And bacteria they're looking at epigenetics, and they're trying to understand what's happening outside of the chromosome. The methylation, demethylation, all these turning genes on and off. And they observed that there is these other sequences showing up outside. And they didn't know anything about it. They just published it, and here's the report. And so then people started looking into this. And what they realized is that the E. coli got infected with a virus. And a bacteria is 50 times larger than a virus. The DNA in the E. coli, with the kind of sophistication that the NSA would be proud of, hacks into the genome of the virus, uses the RNA to create a duplicate strand of the virus DNA, of a segment of the virus, attaches it to an enzyme, it converts it to a protein that then attaches itself, lockstep, hand in glove, into the right sequence of the virus and slices it in half and kills it. And so now, of course, all these biotech companies, well, we've got a gene editor. It's the same thing as quantum mechanics. Screw how the fuck that even happened. I mean, how, without really looking at a morphinogenic field kind of epigenetic and saying, okay, the bacteria learned over in Africa that when it gets this infection over on this side of the planet, we know how to attack this. And it all makes sense in that model. In their materialistic model, well, we don't need to understand this, but now we can go edit genes. Now we've got a gene editor. It's one of the most amazing things in nature. If you look at the sophistication, how the hell does an E. coli bacteria know how to replicate the exact sequence of, in the right portion of the DNA of this virus to kill the virus? It's amazing stuff.
Though, and here's a question for you that I kind of wonder. I interviewed a guy not too long ago. It's a really interesting guy, and he's a healer in Australia, and he does, he's ayahuasca kind of guy, spent a lot of years in the Peruvian forest with some very well-respected shamanistic kind of guys. And what do they, I forget the name, but he's really into music. So here's his thing. It's not just the ayahuasca, it's the ayahuasca and the song and some other ritualistic, like the brushing of these leaves and the sounds and this other stuff. So great. And he has some kind of interesting experiences with that where he's gone in and when these healers tell you, it's the song, man. It's not just the ayahuasca. It's the song. He goes in there with this woman from the Australian Broadcasting Company, and they're doing this report, and she says, hey, it is the song. Until they brushed me with the leaf, boom, that's when it happened. And I also talked to a guy who named Jack Hunter, who publishes a journal called Parapsychology, right? So it's like outside of anthropology, and he's kind of found this, and he's an anthropologist at a university in the UK, but kind of the same thing. When we look at rituals and we kind of incorporate that in, what makes me think of it is exactly what you're saying with these, what are they called? CRISPRs. It's like, but here's my point, here's my question and all that. By the same token, when we isolate the DMT molecule and you ingest it, you do have an experience. So it is, what is really going on? If it is the morphic field, the ritual, the whole thing, and it's the, is the spirit then saying, oh, okay, well, I'll attach to that little processed molecule you have over here, but at the same time, beyond reason. And maybe we can get there part of the way, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe like I guess another way of saying it is, I'm always a little bit careful about bashing the materialists because on the other hand, who the fuck's going to run the world? How are you going to run the world? How are you? It's a crazy system, but come up with a better one,
Oh, no, we're going to come up with a better one. What's happening on the planet right now as far as ISIS and...
You think ISIS is real? We're ISIS.
I don't care about in the context of what I'm saying, the amount of light that's coming onto the planet right now, the amount of enthusiasm and the amount of youthful exuberance for ayahuasca or meditation or spiritual practices. Hell, there's Reiki on on bleach commercials on TV. You know what I'm saying? Like the paradigm shift is happening. And as a result of the paradigm shift happening, the dark forces are also, when you've got these old brittle structures that are starting to coming down like a house of cards, you're going to see a lot of ugliness. And that's what we're seeing. Who ISIS is, I don't care. They're ugly, and that ugliness is part of what's happening. As far as I find, I'm a student, I like to think of myself somewhat as a spiritual anthropologist and looking at all the traditions. And you look at the value of yagyas and homas and mantras in Eastern traditions. And it's all very scientific. When they do this ceremony, it's not a ritual. It's not just like a ritual for ritual's sake, just some sort of thing without really having meaning behind it. The entire universe is made up of name and form, which is all thought and it's all vibration. So can I smoke some DMT here and have an experience for 10 seconds? Yeah. Can I go and be imbibed to be in sort of a superorganism colony of energy with a shaman who's done this before?
Well, what does that mean that you can do both?
One's more powerful, one's more deeper, one's more, yeah, what does it mean? I don't know. You can be standing, there's a word for it, I forget. You can stand next to Buddha and become maybe not enlightened, but you can vibrate at a much higher level just being near this person. Does that mean you need a Buddha to get enlightened? No, you can go do it by yourself. It helps having a beacon that's there. That it just makes sense to me that the experience can be enhanced environmentally at a subtle level.
Totally makes sense to me too.
Right. Doesn't mean nothing's happening if I go try it in my basement.
I don't know. I think it gets really tricky. It's like another part of your film that I really like, and I don't know if that's in your new film, but it's like, I'm paraphrasing, but I can only bring you up to the edge, And that's what I always say, I just bring you up to the edge and then you jump in any direction you want. 'Cause I don't have any answers, but what I can do isn't it liberating to say, that's all bullshit and you need to be deprogrammed from that? That clearly we can kind of say. So where you go forward, who knows? But, because we can't say, should you go, in really practical terms, should you go smoke the DMT in your basement or should you go to Peru? I don't know.
What's the difference between me, who's been meditating for 20 years, a couple times a day, and the news reporter who's never meditated? There's a lot of factors in the equation. For maybe her, who has no experience and her nervous system hasn't been, refined, the brushes and the song makes a much more significant difference than someone who's actually vibrating at a higher level. Who knows? These are all scientific things that can be answered, at least using the methodology of science.
If not answered, at least approached,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and this is really highlighting in my film, look, science is based on assumptions. Some of them are wrong. Let's replace some of those archaic assumptions with some new ones. Let's just assume consciousness is fundamental. Wow. How can we frame and re-bracket all the questions we're asking?
Let's assume the universe has meaning, or let's at least assume that it's not meaningless. What a crazy metaphysical assumption. And these guys spew it out like it's, fact. How have we proven by observation or experimentation that the universe is meaningless? We haven't, as far as I know.
And how do I I have something I call documentary porn.
Mm-hmm. I understand the concept, so go ahead.
Right. Just like, shooting, pictures of atom bombs and Ethiopian starving children, just things that elicit a strong emotional response just for the hell of it. And I don't do that. And you watch all my films like, there's none of that edgy. So how do I say what you just said without being edgy, without any porn, and I'll do it. But it's I don't like going there. I just like it's not even taking the high road per se. It's just,
Well, I think what you do, and you do well, is you just directly say it. You directly just kind of lay it out there, and it's dense. You don't right?
You think those are dense. Wait till you see my new stuff. It is so dense.
Well, that's what I found is, but that's what it takes, because none of it gets through our filters. None of it gets through all of my filters, or your, so we're just kind of hoping that, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? That's what it's all about.
Are you recording this? This would be a great show.
Thanks again to Frank Huguenard for joining me today on Skeptiko. One question I tee up from this interview, and I kind of gave you my answer during the interview, but I'd like to hear what you have to say, and that is, what is the connection, if any, between scientific materialism and the kind of materialistic consumerism that is so prevalent in our society? Is there a link, or is it just in name only? So do let me know what you think about that. The place to answer is through the Skeptiko website at skeptiko.com. You can leave a comment there, jump over to the forum, connect with me on Facebook, or send me an email. If you'd like to hear more of these kind of dialogues, I suggest you check out my whyscienceiswrong.com website and check out some of the interviews I've done with some other podcasters, including the folks at Mysterious Universe, or James Corbett on his show, or Miguel Connor, or Tim Banal, or any of a number of other ones that... So if you're interested in more of my unrestrained opinions about things like this, you got about 10 hours of stuff there you can go through if you so desire. In addition to that, you can expect more of these kind of dialogues in the future, because I am kind of opening up the interviews on Skeptiko to more people who have kind of a broader perspective of the field. Of course, we will still have interviews with leading edge researchers who are doing interesting stuff on consciousness and extended consciousness, but I'm also going to be mixing in some more dialogue, kind of conversational interviews with some leading thinkers that are looking more broadly at this field. So all of that's coming up. A lot of things happening in the Skeptiko world. I do hope you'll stay with me for all of that. Until next time, take care, and bye for now.